Depending on the group you're with, do you struggle to truly be yourself? Is it possible that you've fallen into an identity trap of finding security in people? Today, we'll talk about how to get out of that trap on Living the Message. Hey, this is Living the Message, where we discuss how the message of Christ might dwell among us richly. I'm Pastor Eric Targe, and I'm here with Senior Pastor of the Moody Church, Philip Miller. Hey, Philip.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing good. So
Awesome.
We're talking today about Esther.
Esther.
Queen Esther.
Queen Esther.
Yeah, Esther's a weird one in the Bible because there's no mention of God throughout this book.
The whole book, no mention of God.
No God.
And yet he's conspicuously absent, right?
Yeah.
Like it's behind all the scenes, between every line, the provision of God is clearly evidenced, and yet he's not there. Yeah.
Which is so weird because I think Martin Luther didn't want Esther to be in the Bible?
I think that sounds right, yeah.
Yeah. So
just because of that reason.
Because of that reason. But you're saying that even though we don't see the name, like the capital L-O-R-D, Yahweh, or we don't see God, you're saying he's still between the lines.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things where God is moving through the affairs of men to preserve his people and to be gracious to them. And you see it really notably, like Esther just happens to become queen, and Mordecai happens to overhear the plot of assassination. The king happens to have a dream and remember that Mordecai's the one that took care of him. And so there's all these very obvious things where God is clearly moving in the shadows for the protection of his people. So,
that's so interesting. I love how you brought that out just now, because I think as we think of Esther, one of the things we recognize is it's a story of a whole bunch of things going wrong over and over again, and no one acknowledging the name of God. But even in that moment, you're saying when we ignore God, that doesn't mean that God is not working.
Yeah, and what's interesting, right, is especially in the opening chapters of Esther, like Mordecai and Esther are not particularly acting in robust faith. They're not really being faithful citizens of the covenant. They have a chance to go back to the land of Israel, to join with Zerubbabel and rebuild, and they don't take it, you know. And we know that Mordecai moves into the heart of the city, into the citadel of Susa, which is where all the affluent people are and all the power brokers. And so Mordecai's got this upwardly mobile hunger. He wants to be at the heart of Persian society. And so the fact that the book does not have the name of God is actually, it's reinforcing that Mordecai is functionally almost atheist at this point.
Huh.
He's not
That's
living.
So interesting.
Yeah, he's not living in a really robust faith. Yeah. He's kind of selling out to get ahead in Persian society. This exile pressure has done a number on him. Yeah, and so you see this sort of almost like they're not living as if God is there, right? Yeah, and of course the whole point of the book is even though he's not named, even though he's not obvious, he's not given up on his people. He still is faithful when they are faithless. He is still he's still taking care of them even when they've forgotten him.
So Mordecai, if we had to put him somewhere on the scale, we'd say he's seeking something of power, right?
Yes.
But what about Esther?
I think Mordecai's looking for significance. Probably through power and people and that kind of thing, probably.
But the book's about Esther. What was it? Can you remind us what her identity trap was?
Yeah, so I think, Esther's an orphan. So her parents, she loses her parents at an early age. Mordecai comes in, raises her. But when this whole thing goes down where the king is building his harem, Mordecai does not really shepherd her very well. He doesn't resist that. This is not what you want your daughter to go into the harem of the pagan king who's got an alcohol problem and he's got anger issues. He's super egotistical. He discarded the last woman that he was married to on a whim, right? That this is not a marriage you aspire to be a part of your family.
Yeah. And you've even made the point that in Mordecai's shepherding of Esther, that he chose to be in this city. Like that even signals something.
Yeah,
Can you just remind us really quickly?
Yeah, he moved right into the heart of the citadel.
Which he didn't have to do.
He didn't have to do, but that's where all the upwardly mobile, the who's who, the power brokers, the social elites, all the celebrities, that's where they lived, right? And so if you wanted to be close to power, if you wanted to be wanted to be a part of the great people in Persian society,
be in the room where it happened.
You lived in this, you live in the citadel, right, in Susa, and so we're seeing Mordecai's heart sort of like drift, toward. He's just coping. He doesn't know he feels like God's let him down. He doesn't want to take the risk of going back to the land and throwing all of his hopes on the promises of God. He'd rather build a life in the pagan society and get ahead there, and that's more real to him. The political power is more real than the promises of God.
And Esther's seeking security in that.
Yeah, well, so I think Esther grows up as an orphan. There's a vulnerability to that. Mordecai is not a great dad. He doesn't teach her to resist this. He doesn't try to, help her disqualify herself somehow to get out of this really tough situation.
He's not like Daniel and his friends who refuse the meat.
Refuse the meat, refuse to bow down. No, he's sort of like, go for it. This is awesome. Like, this is our ticket. Like, you get to be part of the royal household. This is a big deal. Let's go.
Yeah. So he's almost like helping feed and create this identity.
I think so. And so I think Esther is just trying to be as safe as she can. Yeah. And she's vulnerable. The men in her life have let her down. Now the king is offering to protect her, and she can kind of come under his, protection. And if the king's happy with her, then she'll be okay. And I think that's just how she's operating. And so whatever she can do to please him, so she can just get through life and be safe. I think that's what's going on. And so she's looking for security through people. In this case, the Xerxes or Ahasuerus.
I think what's interesting about this story, and what I really appreciate that you're bringing out, is that we can sometimes lean toward certain identity traps that we fall into, but sometimes it's the people around us that cause us, or it's not all just us. It's even our social network that builds those traps, which is just important to recognize and be aware of.
Yeah, we all learn a way to sort of manage through life. Yeah. And the patterns in our family and the circumstances in our childhood, the fears that we face, all of that shapes who we are.
Do you see other ways in which, so obviously Esther has Mordecai creating this identity trap into the king, looking to the king for security. Where do you see others forming us, or just things that we would fall into? Where do you think those most common ways of being seen?
Yeah, it's easy to get really sideways on social media these days, but but that's what it is. It's all the ranking, the liking, all of that is are you, as you portray yourself online, are you acceptable? Yeah. Is it safe to be me? Is it safe to have this opinion? Is it safe to express myself in this way? And there's a whole social thing with numbers and likes and comments and algorithms that either tell you, yes, it's okay to be that. You're safe to be this version of yourself, or it's not, right? It's kind of a popularity mechanism, right? But there's lots of things in life like this. It's safe to be in the majority opinion. It's safe to do what's popular. It's safe to just go with what people say. It's safe to choose certain career paths. It's safe. You know what I mean? So if our soul is wired for safety, and all of our souls are at some level, but if that's the deep craving of our heart, we're going to build an identity to achieve that kind of safety. And it might be romantic. If I can just find the right person, then I'll be safe. That person will protect me. That person will take care of me. Or it could be a group. If I'm in that group, then I'll be protected. If I can just fit in with the right circles of power, they'll give me protection. If I can be on the right political side of whatever, the right social side of whatever social issues, virtue signal my way to safety. That's the world we live in, right? It's everywhere. And so we can do this. It looks differently in different lives, but Esther's impulses of looking for safety under a powerful protector, we do that in all kinds of areas of society today. So,
well, I think the points that you brought out, especially when it comes to either virtue signaling or seeking to be a part of the crowd, right? Like we want to fit in. Yeah. Those are things that I think most people can relate to, right? It's like, well, I have to show that I'm on board with this cause, or I have to show that I'm in style in this way, so that my group will love me and respect me, and they'll want me. I'm curious though, because there's a sense in which like we want to belong, and all of us. All of us shift a little bit depending on the friends that we're with, right? You get in one group and it's like, well, now I really care about musical theater. I go into another group and now I pretend to care about football, even though I don't know what a down is. It was Super Bowl last week, and I had about 18 students over my house. I had no idea what was going on. But
I think they want the ball to go that way. Yeah,
I wasn't even sure about. I had students explaining like what the field goal thing and like 7+2, and I was like, can we just like go to the theater? Like, this week I'm going to the theater. And so no, I know. I'm like I love their costumes. No, but how do we know when that's a bad thing? How do we? Because there's nothing wrong, I think, with trying to identify with a group.
Yeah, right.
But how do we know when we've fallen into a trap where this has become consuming?
So the question is, how core is it to your identity, right? So everyone wants to fit in. Everyone feels bad when they don't.
Yeah.
Everyone gets their feelings hurt when they face rejection or betrayal, or like we all feel that, right?
Yeah.
But to the extent that we're looking to those relationships for who we are. Like, I know who I am because I'm popular. Or I know who I am because I fit in. I know who I am because I belong to this group. If you've baked your identity into that, you can't lose it without it utterly crushing and disorienting your life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's one thing to be let's say, here's the difference. If you're secure in your identity in Christ, like you know who you are in Him, and you're dating someone and they break up with you, you're sad.
Yeah.
But if you've baked your identity into being loved by that person, when they break up with you, you're crushed. You're absolutely devastated, like to the core of your being. You don't even know if you can live anymore because who you are was baked into the approval, the acceptance, the love, the protection, or whatever that you got from that other human being. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's the extent to which I allow those relationships, those people around me, to become the reinforcing center of my being, that's where my identity is really rooted and grounded.
Yeah.
And that's when it's so disorienting and unhealthy.
Yeah.
I mean, we could even use the word codependent. We all know people who can't seem to conceive of an existence except for it being tethered to another human being.
Yeah.
And we would say that's unhealthy.
Yeah.
I'm saying that's ultimately an identity issue. And it's taking the God-given desire for safety, which is a good thing. We were meant to feel safe in the Father-loving care and provision, protection of our God. But we've attached it to the wrong things. Yeah. And that's what leaves us vulnerable. That's what opens us up to be so deeply hurt.
Yeah.
That's what leads to codependent patterns of living. And that's super unhealthy. It's sad. And God doesn't want us to have to live that way. Right?
So tell me, I'm curious. I have a person. That's not a person. Don't worry if you're hearing this and you're like, "Oh, I told you that, Pastor Eric." I'm not. It's happened enough times. But I'm curious if this falls into that trap, because I've had multiple people over the years. I work with college students, as you know, so lots of these of people like, "Yeah, I just saw somebody post on Instagram or post on Facebook a picture of a party that like I thought I was their friend and I wasn't invited, and it's crushing to them." And they can't get. Would that fit into this category? Would you say?
It might. And it's certainly a people thing. So in terms of people, power, possessions, it's a people thing for sure.
Yeah.
It might be a significance thing. I have my sense of worth is tied to being at the party. It could be a security thing. I feel very unsafe.
I feel like I have no friends. I have no network.
Yeah, like I'm vulnerable because I wasn't at that party. That would be a safety impulse. Satisfaction is is more of a happiness driven. It's I want to be happy, and the party might have been, man, I missed out on a good time, and that might be more of a satisfaction thing. But no matter what it is, it's definitely looking to people, to a social group, to know that I'm enough, know that I'm safe, know that I'm happy and secure in life. Like my identity is tethered to that group of people, which leaves you then vulnerable to that group.
Yeah.
Right?
I think one of the things I'm thinking about, one story that comes to mind is a person who met with me and they weren't invited to a party. This happened too many times. But someone who said, like, I just know they were talking about me, which goes to that safety side.
Yeah,
of it.
right.
So if you know that you've fallen...
I'm scared because I wasn't there. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you know you've fallen into that trap and you can't let it go, like, I saw there's people in that room.
Yeah.
So they didn't want me there because there's probably something going on and they don't really love me and I'm not part of their group. Like, how do you get out of that hole? How do you get out of that trap?
Yeah. That's a good question. So the first thing I think is to acknowledge or recognize what's going on in your own heart. Like, I have allowed this social group, this circle of friends, this sense of these people, I've allowed them way too much say over who I am. I've allowed their approval way too much weight in my heart. I'm addicted, if you will, to that group, those people. That's why I can't stand up to them. That's why I can't be myself, really, because I'm always blending. I'm always masking. I'm always trying to fit in order to feel safe in this setting. I'm always trying to do what everybody expects or what they want, trying to make them happy so that I'm okay, right? And I've allowed those people, really, in a sense, to become my functional God.
Ooh.
That I'm living for their approval. They're the ones that are going to make me safe in this universe. So I have to play their game. I have to do that thing, make them happy, or I'm not safe, right? In other words, they've become my God, in a sense. Yeah. They're the ones I'm living for.
That's really helpful. I like, because I think when you answer that question of what's going on in my heart, you've also helped give a little bit more of a diagnostic. I just want to say again to people, I want to ditto what you said, that like how you know you've fallen in is you can't be yourself and you can't stand up. I just think those are two good things to recognize. Like, if you feel like you can't call people out and you can't really be yourself, what else? How else do you get out? You said there were multiple things.
Well, I'm just saying, so I think the first step is to diagnose it. Is just say, okay, I have allowed these people, whoever they are, this person, these people, this group, way too much weight when it comes to my own identity, my own soul. I've tethered who I am to that group. Yeah. I'm not actually I don't have an independent identity. I'm actually tethered to them, right? And I think once you start to see that, then you could say, okay, where was I supposed to find that security? The need for security is not bad. We all need to feel safe.
Yeah.
Where we look to feel safe is what makes the difference, right? And that's where the Bible would tell us, like, you were made ultimately to take refuge in God. Like, He's your shelter. He's your, it's under the shadow of His wings that you will find refuge and safety and security. Like, He is your God. He's your good Father who loves and protects you, who is providing for you. Like, ultimately, you were meant to feel safe with your Father, right?
Yeah.
And that is a different place to live from.
Yeah.
If I run to Him with my vulnerabilities and my fears and my when I'm scared, if I go to my Father and I rest in Him and I take shelter in Him, then I can actually go out into the world and I can engage with people. But they're not my identity, They don't have nearly as much power over me because I'm safe already, because I have a good Father who's watching over me, right? And so that, I think, is the hinge. And that's where, it presses us back into the gospel that we have this good Father because of what Jesus has done when He died in our place and for our sake and bore all of our sin and shame on the cross, rose again to make us right with God so we can be children of God now and forever. And so we have a Father now that we can run to. And that's just it's a whole different way to live, right?
Yeah.
I'm living as a child, not as an orphan. I'm looking for my security in Him.
It's a good word. As we try to think about this, we're thinking about the gospel here. What would you say are some of the key resources that the gospel offers to deal with this identity trap?
Yeah. Well, we've already started talking about some of them.
Yeah,
right?
we have.
But this idea that the safest place to be is with your Father. Like even my kids, right? So I've got some young kids and some kids that are getting a little older. And like just last night, my son had a bad dream. And what did he do? You know what he did, right?
Yep.
He came into our bedroom. He climbed in between Krista and I. And he pulls up the covers and he cuddles in, right? And he wants to touch both of us. So he spreads out his body so he's touching both of us.
Oh, I know that too well.
But there's something in that sort of innocent, childlike trust that is beautiful. Like
how do we live that?
When you're scared, you want to go be with your parents, right?
Yeah.
And that's a safe place. And I would say, at the end of the day, that's exactly what we do. Now, we don't have a physical Heavenly Father who will wrap his arms around you or whatever. But
there is no heavenly bed to crawl into.
Right.
So here, what does it look like?
But I can come to the Scriptures, and I can read the promises of God, and I can sense His heart, and I can cry out in prayer, and I can ask Him to be near, which He promises. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'm with you always to the very end of the age. So like when the Psalms say, take refuge in the Lord God. He's a mighty tower. He's a strong rock. He's a refuge. He's like a bird that covers you with His wings and takes shelter under the shadow of the Almighty. And like, what are all those images? Those are all word pictures of just get close to your Father. You know, and it's interesting. My wife, when our kids were really little babies, they don't know how to go to sleep, and so that you have to soothe them so they go to sleep. And Krista would hold our kids to her chest, and they would hear her heartbeat. Yeah. And if Mom was calm, they would calm. Like their heartbeat would begin to mimic Mom's heartbeat, right? Yeah. And it would slow down, and as they slowed down, they would relax and they would rest. And I think there's something of that in the invitation of our Father to come close to Him, to hear His words, to trust in His promises. The Holy Spirit's inside of you speaking these words of truth, right? Yeah. Reminding you who you are, that you are a son or daughter of God, that you belong to Him. And I think if you can start to catch the beat of your Father's heart, which is calm and relaxed and non-anxious, you know, like all of a sudden you can start to settle down with truth and remind yourself of who you are, that you're safe, that you are loved, that you belong, that these things are actually true. Ask the Holy Spirit, remind me of what is true, that I am safe and kept and belong to my God. And that's a beautiful, those are beautiful things. I love Jude chapter 1, verse 1. It's only one chapter, but verse 1, it says, to those who are called, beloved, and kept in Jesus Christ. Like to remember that, right? Yeah. I am called. Like God called me. He chose me. In Jesus Christ, before the foundation of the world, He loved me, set His heart upon me, drew me to Himself. I belong to Him, right? Called. I'm beloved. Yeah. Like God smiles over my life for Jesus' sake. Like I now am imputed with the righteousness of Christ. I belong to Him. That can never be taken away. Yeah. I am beloved. I am safe. And I'm kept. Yeah. I'm kept. I'm secure.
Nothing can tear me away from the love of God.
Nothing can separate me from the love of God.
Yeah.
Right? Neither nakedness or sword or death. Famine. Yeah. Famine. Which is, and there is trouble in this world. We have to remember this. Jesus said, there will be trouble. So trouble, that's Jesus' forecast for your life. Trouble today, trouble tomorrow. Yeah. But here's the thing. It can't actually touch your soul. Yeah. Don't fear the one who can kill the body, but the one who can kill the soul. Like at the end of the day, your soul is perfectly safe in this universe. There is nothing Satan or this world can throw at you that can actually harm the interior person of who you are. The spiritual life that has been made eternally alive in Jesus Christ is untouchable. And so you're perfectly safe. The worst thing that can happen to you is you die. Right? George MacDonald said, death used to be an executioner, now it's just a gardener. Plant you in the ground, you grow back alive, right? You're untouchable, fully safe forever in Jesus Christ. And so to learn to take those truths and let them become bedrock, down deep, that's the anchor of my soul. That's where I'm looking for safety. Then allows me to go have relationships which are healthy and balanced, and I can be myself because I know who I am. And I can stand up to those groups because I know who I am. I'm not looking to the people around me for the same kinds of security. It still will bother me when they sneer and reject and when they are mean. That will always hurt, but it won't hurt all the way down and all the way in. It'll be different.
Well, what's going on in your heart? If you feel this need for security in people, call out to God in prayer, read his word, and remind yourself of the truth that he is a good father who is keeping you in his hands. If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd encourage you to go check out the message that went along with it. If you ever have questions or want to send us some comments, we love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can send us an email at livingthemessage@moodychurch.org. We also always appreciate hearing from you by text when you have questions. We truly hope that today you were encouraged, equipped, and enabled to now go and live the message.